What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ladies Who Brunch, the podcast where we have all of the conversations that everybody's afraid to have at the dinner table. But at the brunch table, anything goes. I'm your host, Julissa Contreras. As you all know, I am a graduate of the Fame School, and I was in the drama department. But with the drama department in the basement, as they placed us, were the tech majors. And I remember I used to be like, they're like a mystery. It always felt like they were running behind the scenes and behind curtains. And I'm like, who are the genius people making all of this life happen on this stage? And one of the people who was behind the scenes was really a powerhouse. It felt like she was running the show. She had all those people on lock, but was such an incredible leader. And to see where she is at now, to see the ways that she has reconnected with her roots and pivoted from this beautiful artistic form into something that to me feels revolutionary and so important. All the flowers to you. So, Janett, tell us, who the fuck are you?
Oh my God. Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Janett. Janett Liriano. Who am I? Well, I am the middle of five Dominican sisters, and I'm also the CEO and co-founder of Inaru. Inaru is a Dominican brand. We are the only factory and brand in the Dominican Republic that sources 100% of our cacao in the country and exports 100% of it as finished products. So normally our countries just sell the beans. We said, no, we're going to build a factory, we're going to build a brand, and you will buy Dominican excellence. So I've been doing that for the last 6 years. But I'm a New Yorker. When people ask me, like, who are you? Like, the order I tend to say is New Yorker first, Dominican second, American third. And maybe over the last few years, it's like Dominican first, New Yorker second. But like through and through, I like my bacon, egg, and cheese. So I'm excited to be having this brunch with you.
Thank you so much for being on here. Honestly, like when I first saw you launch the brand, I was like, wait, chocolate? And then I guess, I didn't know how many sisters you had. And I started sister. I was like, damn, this girl looks so much like Janett. Like, who is she? And I think I'd seen her first. And then I was like, yeah, no, this is Janett's sister. Oh, okay. And it like all came together in such a beautiful way. And it inspires me because a little fun fact. So way back in the day, my grandfather was a chocolatier in Dominican Republic, right?
Oh,
And he worked for some time for Embajador, but he also worked for others. And he not only worked in the factory, but he was the person who would go from town to town, go to the farms, look at the product. So that's his legacy. And unfortunately, my grandfather passed when my mother was very, very young. So we never got to meet him. And as you know, with a lot of our history, so much of it is oral. And so I lost so many details of that part of his life. But when I saw this come to life through you, I was just like, yeah, that's so powerful because there is something about not only building something in your homeland, but something so particular and specific that is connected to the earth in a way that I just think is beautiful and delicious because hello, chocolate. I just thought it would be wonderful to bring you to the fold and into this conversation so that everybody can hear this journey and learn about this delicious chocolate because y'all stop buying Hershey's, stop buying
please.
Nestle, like, for so many reasons, right? But like, support your people and these industries because I think oftentimes when we think about how big corporations come into spaces and take over countries and don't pay people fairly, to know that there's somebody who's connected to the community and actually cares about the community that is working with them on top of the fact that they care about the product that they're making is incredibly rare. And so these are the opportunities that we have to be social justice warriors. Like protesting and all these things are great, but it's also great to really have knowledge of the people who are protesting and revolutionizing in other ways that are easy to support. It's easy to say, I want to eat some chocolate because y'all even got chocolate for the vegans. So
Yes, we
like,
do. All of our chocolate is vegan. It's good.
I want people to know more. But before we get into the sweet chocolate talk, let's talk a little bit about you with these brunch questions. So I would love to know, what is your favorite brunch plate and drink?
Oh my God, this is a tough one. Okay, in the Dominican Republic, it's mango, or I feel like they're gonna take my cedula, and I'm not a Dominican. So I assume people know, but in case you don't, it's like puree of plantains with like onions and cheese and salami. Like I love mango. Every time I eat it, I'm like I don't exercise enough, but I'm gonna eat this anyway. But on a traditional American brunch, I love an eggs Benedict. I'm a Benny girl with literally anything, hash browns, and then my favorite brunch drink, like limonada with lima, not lemon, like the green limeade. And if it's gonna be an alcoholic drink, I don't know if you can go wrong with a frosé. I've gotten into all kinds of trouble on frozen rosé, so I don't drink it anymore. I've fallen into pools and stuff. I'm not an alcoholic, but I did have an encounter with the on the wrong side of a frosé, but that's probably what I would say.
Brunch trouble is good trouble, in my opinion. It's daytime trouble. It's you can get up early the next day and tend to your life trouble. So kudos.
I hit that pool pretty hard though, slip. So be
Yeah,
careful with the frosé. But yeah, frosé, eggs benny, or mango if I'm in the DR.
I love that. All right. So while you're enjoying this meal, what is your favorite bochincha topic to discuss?
I don't know. I feel like my bochincha is almost always political. I'm always like, look at this nonsense. Like, oftentimes it is the caucasity, but if it's not that, there's this girl I follow, Benny. She's Congolese on Instagram, and she has like the channel or like series called "Where Are the Men?" And it's like she'll post a reel of, like, some guy doing something embarrassing on the internet, like, I don't know, like flexing his butt cheek muscles or something. She'll be like, "Men used to hunt. Men used to go to war." And that topic is always fun for me. I'm like, "Hey, ladies, how have your encounters been?"
Brunch is one of those times where men loving people can get together and really hear and exchange stories so that we don't feel so alone because
Mhm.
I don't think we want to hate men. I just think that sometimes things get
They
complicated. We have to speak the truth. We just have to speak
But
to our
they be outside. They're doing all kinds of stuff. So it's like so actually to that point, it's like maybe it's like the distinction. I think brunch is a perfect diagnostic tool
yes.
between boys, guys, and men. So, like, I
Mm.
often tell people there's 3 classes of I mean, it's similar with women or similar with any type of person, but, like, there's a boy, which would be somebody who's extremely emotionally immature and doesn't have their finances or their character in order. A guy is someone who has finances and maybe their independence in order, but the emotional maturity of a teenager. And then a man or an adult person, a man or a woman, has their emotional stuff together, their spiritual stuff together, and their financial house in order. And I think most people are dealing with guys or in worst case scenarios, boys, and they're calling them men. So the question is, where are the men? It's like they didn't finish doing the evolution, or where are the women? Like that's the question, right? So brunch is a good diagnostic tool to know who you're talking to.
Listen, man, I love you. Like, I want us to be in a
I love you
space
too.
where we can find each other at our powerful points that are not bogged down by the machismo we've been taught or even this capitalist mindset that sometimes puts men's priorities out of order so that they don't know how to show up in the relationship, which is not to say that there aren't women and non-binary folks who also struggle with that, but in a male dominant society, what's happening there is louder. So we're not trying
Mhm.
to, it's just all the intersections land where the conversation is loudest in your corner. So it's all love though. It's all love. All right. So what was it like going out to eat when you were growing up?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I grew up in Queens, and as I think I said earlier, like I'm one of 5 girls in the middle. So like going out to eat was not as often because there was a lot of kids. My parents worked very hard, but when we would go out, it was always like a very exciting affair. It's like we're going out to eat. It was like not a common occurrence. Most of the time we would order in. But we would go to this one Spanish restaurant, a Dominican restaurant called Montagnier, which is in Jamaica. It's on Jamaica Avenue, and these people had the best freaking rotisserie chicken. But we would go there, and I remember I would feel like because we grew up in this like very, my mom worked really hard so that we could live in a very good neighborhood to be zoned to a good school because you know how it is here, it's all zoning. So, but there wasn't a lot of Dominicans or Latinos in that community. Um, so we would go to this other neighborhood to get like really good Dominican food and we would like do all of our shopping there and stuff. And we'd sit in Montagnier and I'd look around and be like, this is a whole world that I don't really know, but I feel it at home. All of these Dominican people, that person could be an auntie, but my parents were the only people from their family in the States. So it was a moment to kind of see what the larger ecosystem of what our family is at this restaurant and kind of pick up those like soft cultural moments and like seeing my parents be relaxed in a very different way while they were ordering these foods and making these jokes. Like I always remember thinking this is an interesting moment for them to feel at home so far from home. And that was always very, very present for us. As we got older, we started taking our parents out, but we all started working, and that was fun. But as children, the few times we would go out, it'd be to be I think it was always to places that made them feel like they were home.
In a culture where there's all this fast food and getting out food outside of the home is just like easy. It's easy to
Mhm.
do. We miss the real value of like gathering around the table and not just with your friends, but full family experiences. As first gen, second gen kids, it's easy for us to think about the experiences we had around the table going out to eat with our friends and things like that. But to your point, like similar, big family, like could not always afford to just be at restaurants all the time. So when we did have those moments, the depth of those impacts also for me highlighted how special restaurants are, right? Especially the mom and pop shops that
Yes.
the test of time in our neighborhoods, because that's one of the spots in Queens, but we got Caridad in the Bronx and all of these other places where like,
We would go to Caridad. My dad would drive us over there. I know where that is,
yeah.
okay? Dominicans be going anywhere where there's a good chicken,
You
okay?
know, that they love that chicken, that staple rotisserie chicken, okay, with the little garlic sauce, always,
It was
you
always
know?
a battle for that sauce, like,
Yeah,
"That's mine!"
always. It's really beautiful, to hear you highlight that because it is true to have those experiences really allow for cultural exchange and family building that does resonate differently than when you're in someone's four walls, when it's either your house or your tia's house where there's all these other rules in place.
Factors.
Yeah. About how you coexist, but like in this neutral space, it's all about the connection, the food, and the love. So now we are going to move into our cheers section where we shout out dope people and brands doing dope shit. And this week, I would like to shout out Bisqueya because Bisqueya and Inaru for me are two companies that are doing something that's very important, not just for Dominicans, but also for the ways that you source your ingredients and how through that sourcing you're uplifting communities of people who are often being taken advantage of by these larger companies. And it gives an opportunity, I'm sure, that's very enriching for you all personally, but also for Dominicans on the island to see that not all Dominican Americans come here, integrate to the American dream, and forget about what home is or what their experiences are. And so I find that intersection. And Bisqueya is led by Marita Abreu. And what I love about the birth of Bisqueya is that her family owns a restaurant in Brooklyn. And there was this sauce that we was just talking about, the garlic sauce for the rotisserie chicken.
So
They had
good.
their own little hot sauce that they would put with the meals, and people were obsessed with it and they would always ask them, do you sell it? Like, can we just buy the hot sauce? And so they used to, like, in their own little packaging, in their own way, like sell these little hot sauces. But then Marita saw an opportunity to grow that beyond just that local community. And now we see that Bisqueya has grown far and wide. And I'm just super, super proud of them. And they do more than just hot sauce now. They have adobo, they have sazon. Yeah. So they have
Mm.
grown in their offerings, and I'm sure will continue to grow. So I just want to shout it out because it's also now not just an alternative to hot sauce, but it's an alternative to Goya.
We
So,
need an alternative,
okay,
okay?
with natural ingredients. I want us to think about Bisqueya when you are shopping. They are in stores nationwide. You can order from them online. You might have seen them featured on Hot Ones as one of the hot sauces. So do not sleep on Bisqueya. They have some incredible flavors, and I wanted to give them a shout out this week. So, Janet,
Same.
you tell me, what's your shout out for this week?
My God, well, I just wanna co-sign the Pisqueya shout out. I love that brand, and I'm really glad that I have a alternative for adobo. Relatedly, there's this awesome platform, Onekin, which is a platform where you can shop from creators of color. Pisqueya is on Onekin, Inaru is on Onekin, so you can really, like, basically shop the diaspora and other underrepresented founders and businesses, buy directly, and it's this amazing it's kind of like an Amazon of both ethical and diversely sourced goods. And they do live streams and all of these amazing events. It's just this amazing platform that I do think we need to find alternatives to the Amazons of the world in terms of how we pay, how we shop for convenience. And it's really beautifully built. One of the co-founders is Dominican, and the other gentleman, I'm not sure where he's from, but he's also a brother in the diaspora. So I would just say, check out One Kid. That's how I met Biscaya, and support the democratization of infrastructure. That's what they're doing. And We need that.
I feel like in a time where people are like, what is the global strike? What are the global boycotts we're willing to do? I think people automatically think, but how am I going to tap into the convenience of what I need? I think when you think about platforms like this, you can say, okay, well, I can still order the things that I need. And it can be on this platform that's more ethical with brands that are more ethical. So just like the win-win-win. So if you guys are like, no, I want to spend my money, I can't boycott, spend it in places like Onekin. Sometimes that's how you learn because algorithmically, the way Amazon works and other marketplaces like Amazon work, it's hard for brands to really get to the top of your search. And so sometimes, even if people are on Amazon and things like that, they're not coming up high on the search results. So
Yeah.
you as a consumer are still missing out on the product that is the one you probably actually want and not just the first one that they shove in your face.
100%. And by the way, guys, we are a $1 trillion buying group. So if like the diaspora in the US and even across South America. So I'm Janet. I like data. So I will be dropping numbers here that you can verify on Google. But with that being said, if we, instead of, I always say people are always focusing on opting out or boycotting or calling people sell out. That's what the enemy wants you to focus on. You should be focusing on where do you buy in? Where do you participate? Like, don't ask what to not do. Ask what to do because that's actually more energy. And the to your point about like OneKin and Amazon and all these other things, if we just chose to spend our money in each other, it wouldn't matter what anybody else is doing because we are a self-sustaining nation. Like in terms of the dollars that they circulate within our own community, if we support our own businesses, if we seed invest in each other, if we crowdfund for each other, we actually don't need to participate in like the regular financial system because our system is what's actually powering the modern financial system. So buy from people you want to succeed. Okay. Take the extra step because there actually is someone who's built the thing you're looking for. It does exist. They just are waiting for you. So support them. Support Piscaya. Support One Kid. Support Ladies Who Brunch. That's
Yeah,
my
thank you.
that's my sales pitch for the day.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I think that that point is very well taken. Ask not what you should stop doing, ask what you can start doing because it
Right.
is much easier to say I'm going to open myself up to a new habit than to say I'm going to completely stop something that is part of my day to day and the way that I function. So if you
Hmm.
must stop, if you must shop, shop in the right places.
Shop in
Absolutely.
other places, and now it's fun. People want to be told yes. People don't want to be told no. I think a lot of the reason our movements are not effective is because they feel punitive, and it's already like we're suffering enough. So it's like now I can't get my prime. No, it's like now I get to buy healthier, tastier, better. Like we need to tell ourselves yes more often. So say yes to each other. Say yes to Piscaya. Their sauces are good. I have them in my house. I didn't know they had adobo though. I'm thinking about the adobo, but okay. I know what I'm doing with my chicken next week. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
yeah, that and the sazon. I was at an event with Maritza the other day, and I got the sazon, and I just used it, and I was like, "Yes, no more of those orange, red 40 packages." It was delicious.
Hormone disruptors.
Yeah, like, you can taste the freshness, you can taste the point of what sazon was or what adobo
Was
was for our people at the roots before Goya or anyone was here to pack it with all these chemicals, and so, I think, again, going back to this connection and going to your roots through people who are doing the hard work, because let me tell you, it wouldn't be me who was about to dedicate my life to figure out how to create these adobos, not because it's not important, but because it's not my ministry, and so, in some ways, we have to support each other because people who dedicate their time and intention around these things are taking it on almost as a ministry. And so how do you uplift the power of what that is and what that leaves for generations that come after us? Speaking about roots and legacy, we're going to move into our Tuta Loca es section where we call out motherfuckers who are doing the most. I have made videos talking about this that don't often get much love. I talk about this sometimes in spaces where people are like, well, I don't know. It feels like you're just trying to cop out and give grace to your community where it doesn't deserve. But I take issue,
everybody deserves grace. Back up. So if
period,
there's a
right?
logical fallacy there,
Yeah.
okay,
You
talk to
know?
me when talk. Take the stick out of your eye. But
Yeah.
anyway, continue.
Yeah, so no, 100%, right? Because I think that there are different levels to having conversations about race and anti-blackness. I think there are conversations where you are listening or speaking to share, right? Where the goal is not, I'm trying to tell you that what I'm saying is a truth or the way things should be. I'm just speaking to the reality and context, right? We're contextualizing things. Then there are conversations that are to educate. And then there are conversations that are to build, right? And at all of these different levels, the way that we tackle issues like the quintessential, I'm no black, I'm Dominican, needs to shift. And what I find is in my the way that people center that conversation is not that they're calling out anti-blackness in Dominican Republic because it exists, but that without the contextualization of how some of that came to be for folks, we do a big disservice to Black Dominicans who do not believe that, are not living their life that way, and have zero luxury to say, oh no, I'm not Black, I'm Dominican. They know who they are, they understand their history, and then the question becomes, but do you also understand the context and history? And it's more than just Trujillo. I feel like all they can talk about is like, oh, what happened at the Massacre River? Yeah, that, and there's so much more. And we don't like to look at the political history of Dominican Republic past Trujillo in a
No,
way.
that's a very on purpose thing. That's on purpose. They don't
Absolutely.
want to.
Which is what brings me to this point. I want to just say this again. I am not in any way saying that we should not be having the conversations around anti-blackness in Dominican Republic, around around the relationship between Dominican Republic and Haiti. What I'm saying is that a lot of us, especially a lot of Dominican Americans who we love Dominican Republic, but we are not well studied on our history. Not to the depths that we can really claim that
No.
everything we're saying is foolproof. And so I'm wanting for people to really do themselves the service of digging deeper, because if you want to talk about anti-blackness, that's one thing, but how do you want to serve the reversal of anti-blackness does require holding a level of space and grace and education. And for you, as somebody who has built an entire business on the island and have lived in the different intersections of what is it like to be Black or of the diaspora here in the States, what is it like to go back home and have that experience, and you're working with people on the ground who are also Black, like what is the realities of that conversation, both on the island, maybe how you're experiencing it, or anything that you would like to share on that topic?
I agree with the Tuta Loca call out because I was literally, promise you, just talking about this with my sister in the morning. I'm going to answer your question, but I want to add to it
Please.
first. So one of my closest friends is, she would consider herself a Black American, African American. And I think, so I'm going to say three things. The first thing I would say is I would strongly advise people to be very curious and concerned when a narrative is being put forth about a people. What was the genesis and what is the benefit of this narrative? So out of nowhere, this Dominicans are the problem within the Black American community because they don't think that they're Black. What people need to understand is there is no unified Black identity. We can all recognize that we're Black, but just like Europeans can be French, Italian, German, Bosnian, Romanian, they know that they're phenotypically white, but they have no issue having pride and distinction for their individual histories, strengths, weaknesses. They are aware that an Italian does not have the same history, financial situation as someone from Liechtenstein or Switzerland. They're different people, even though they may share borders. So it is actually, you're actually assuming a narrative of the oppressor to flatten the shades of diversity across the diaspora. You are actually, you are choosing to elect into the story. There's nothing about your identity beyond the Blackness. Of course, Dominicans know that they're Black, but in ignorance on the largely one of the first nations in this hemisphere and how our racial history is very different than what happened in Haiti, than what happened in Jamaica, than what happened here. I live in the country. That ignorance is intentional to weaponize and divide a faction of people, Latinos and Black people, who have historically not been divided. Like this narrative was planted. And if we don't identify that it was seeded into our communities, through wounds, we're going to fall into it and be getting into stupid conversations like, in my opinion, why most Dominicans say, I'm not Black, I'm Dominican. It's because they reject the identification of their character and value against a skin color. And as someone who lives in the DR and is probably in the middle in terms of, obviously, I'm Black, ain't nobody going to be confused about that we know. And I'm fine with that. I'm more than happy with that. I always say that. in the Dominican Republic, the first thing that you are is a Dominican. You're first a Dominican, and then you're a Blanquito or whatever the heck. But you can have a blonde Dominican and a person who is as, dark as ebony, and those two people will actually have a lot of cultural moments in common because they're both Dominican. And what they don't identify with is what they understand is the identity story of Blackness in the US. And frankly, they're not wrong about that because we don't have the same historical context. So Dominicans drawing a distinction that I actually don't have that same experience is not from a place of superiority, it's from a place of accuracy. They got other issues, but it's not the same experience. And I actually think we do harm by not recognizing those differences because Black Americans are drivers of innovation and just the freaking future. They're the originators of basically everything we think is cool and amazing and science. This is a group of people who have a legacy of innovation that is solely theirs, and everybody else is following what they do. And in my mind, by being able to identify these distinctions, we can be proud of being a part of the community while respecting the uniqueness of our traumas because they're not the same. So I personally have a strong problem with this narrative because I think it's trying to sow unnecessary envy and hatred between communities that historically did not have this problem with each other. And if we're not going to be smart about the psyops operations that happen in terms of geopolitical control, we're missing the fucking plot. Excuse my language, but we're missing the point because this conversation has been planted and we are taking the bait instead of thinking more curiously. Why are they so concerned about destroying the integrity of the Dominican character? Because if you go there, you'll realize it's a bunch of multicolored people just rocking it out, living fabulous. And if they don't want Black Americans to know that that's possible for them, which is why they want to draw a divide between us. Because if Black Americans go to the DR and see the ease that they can have, not that there isn't racism, there's racism everywhere, but if they can see a model of land ownership, if they can see a model of business ownership, if they can see a model of ease, if they can see that it's not what they said, what could that inspire in Black Americans? They don't want that. They don't want that. So the Tuta Loco for me is, can we think a little more deeply, guys? Because we need to. I'm more than happy to be unpopular with you on the internet on this topic because I will die on this hill. Dominicans know that they're Black. It's not that they don't know that. They don't agree with what you think it means. That's it. The difference is that we don't agree with what you think it means. And of course, racism, colorism is a factor, but it's not like we don't got a mirror and we don't have a problem with our Blackness. We just reject that it's everything. And I personally, as a Dominican, think that that's right. I personally agree with that. So anyway, that's my hill.
And thank you for your transparency because as you were talking, I was thinking about how oftentimes, because one, especially on the internet, when we're using these platforms as the platforms to have these conversations and we're just getting little bites, like sound bites of what people think or feel about things, it doesn't leave room for holistic conversation.
No.
In absence of holistic conversation, we miss the opportunity to understand what is the anti-blackness conversation at particular intersections, because depending on the intersection you're talking about, to your point, like racism does exist on the island like it exists everywhere else in the world. And so if we're saying we want to speak about it specifically around, let's say, how darker skinned Dominicans live in a particular fear or are harassed by the police there in a particular way because they get confused for Haitian. This is something I know from my cousins who are, and I have been more than once, almost every time I'm with this motherfucker in the car in DR and we're going somewhere outside of the bounds of La Capital, like we get stopped and he gets interrogated to get to see if we're Haitian or if we're whatever. Fine. So like that's an intersection of a conversation. To say that that intersection automatically means that if my cousin, for example, were to say, oh, I'm Dominican, not Black, right, that he is now suddenly anti-Black. Because if we're talking about the intersection, what you learn is, oh, there's this survivalist mentality that comes about. And that is where the desire to distinct comes from, not from him looking at himself and thinking that he has blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin.
Yeah.
So like there is a nuance.
It's survival in a sense.
Right, right, which, and for some people, they might not be like, but still, fuck that, like, fuck the power and still whatever. Sure, like, that is a truth, but to demonize a people or to be like, oh, well, those Dominicans, they don't know they're Black, and to make that the complete narrative around all of the people on the island is problematic, because then my question becomes, if we want to work together as a diaspora, what does it look like to honor the work that it takes for, let's say, a Black Dominican who may have some sort of level of self-hate that's rooted in all these other things that were placed upon them, which number one is where grace comes in, beauty standards, just the way society integrates them. People are trying to make it the same way Black capitalists in America feel like, all right, well, I'm going to engage in Black capitalism in a way, and that can be very harmful for people in a way that has nothing to do with melanin, but is very harmful to people. But we're not policing their choice to integrate into a system that is still harming people. And so sometimes when we're having these other conversations, again, it's not to say you say, oh, it's right, so I'm gonna give you a pass. It's to say, oh, well, I understand the complexities here. And then how do we meet each other as a diaspora in those complexities? Where I understand for Black Americans, and this is a different intersection of a different conversation, is for Dominican Americans, right? First generation, second generation, and onward, there is this feeling of why don't Dominican Americans take the time or prioritize understanding Black American history, since a lot of Black American movements have paved the way for a lot of the ways in which they have also been able to thrive in this country, because we're, police look at us, systems look at us. They're not always saying, this is a Dominican versus an African American versus a Jamaican. And so we do get, to your point, flattened in a particular way. So I can understand the pain and the hurt, and in some cases, the disrespect that is received by the Black American community by the ways that people move very flippantly and audaciously around the narrative of Blackness without any context, without really any understanding of history. That is another intersection. But us as Black Dominican Americans living in America have a different exposure and relationship to that narrative than if we go back to my cousin on the island who don't live in America, never lived in America, has maybe stepped in America once. Like, to yell at both of us with the same narrative when really everybody has different levels of responsibility and experiences around what it means to claim Blackness or respect a Black American history. On the island, they don't know really what that Black American history has done to benefit them, if at all, because they're not from here. And so when we're talking about Blackness and adapting that conversation in that way, it's hard to do. Like, and to your point, sometimes they're like, no, I'm not Black, because when you're saying Black, I feel like you're asking me to say I'm African American, and I'm not African American.
And why should they agree if that's not true? So also to your point, like I actually think this is a very important conversation from multiple levels, because societies they don't have to anything, but I would recommend that people take a more holistic view of how we look at conversations between groups of people. So for me, my experience has often been that what we're seeing between the Black American community and maybe Afro Latino communities, but specifically Dominicans, have been the hot topic for I don't know how freaking long. And again, my point on that is, please stop coming to Punta Cana then if we're then just going to slander us having all your fun on all your all-inclusive resorts and feeling safe and feeling wonderful and all these other things, and then shit talking us on whatever reel because it's the fashionable thing to do. Here's the thing. We have to acknowledge that there's been a disordered attachment style across the diaspora. It's a disordered attachment style that we have to each other. It's like, I want to be connected to you, but no, I don't. And you're the bad guy, blah, blah, blah. And that makes sense because all of our people have been traumatized in different ways. And every diaspora individual has a different reaction, a different maladaptive reaction to how to exist in a traumatic society, because that's just the truth. Now, in the Dominican Republic, what I want to invite for people to think about, there's 4 trauma responses, and I talk about this all the time. There's freeze, there's flight, there's fight, and there's fawn. Fawning, just like, love you, staying alive, the Stockholm effect, and all of that. I think that what we're finding is people's projection of 2 trauma responses at war. In the Black American movement, the trauma response is to fight because it was necessary for survival. Flight, aka immigration, was never an option and is a very resisted one, whereas diaspora people from the Caribbean Flight is always an option. I can always just leave and go somewhere else. Fun is always an option because they have different people use different tools for survival. So what I think you're seeing is rage, that the fawn strategy of quote unquote, maybe in their mind, appeasing the oppressor, integrating with the oppressor, speaking the language of the oppressor. They're different survival strategies, and Dominicans in their context, well, mine led to better results. And not only did mine lead to better results, this is the perspective that might be there. Also, the genesis of how the intermixing in the DR came to be is fundamentally different than what happened with the slave trade in the United States. They sent a bunch of Spaniards that had to live there. They had no other choice. They had to build a society. They had to build schools. They were the merchant class that was forced to be there, forced to integrate. Black people in the Dominican Republic had land rights much sooner than others. Yes, Haiti came and liberated us from Spain, but even that story is not told in its full complexity. And these are completely different cultures, completely different languages, completely different faiths, completely different economic outlooks. These things have an impact on identity, and it's absolutely insane to to ask a person to drop all of that context. And by the way, there's privileges that come with that context. And it would be dishonest of me to act like I don't come with those privileges of being an immigrant. There actually is a privilege in that, in speaking another language and having a Spanish last name. It's a disadvantage in some contexts, but in many other contexts, it's an advantage because I have more connectivity to other immigrants. So there's actually more community available to me than was allowed to be made available to the African American community, which is not fair. Like the brutality that African Americans had to survive is objectively harder, more evil than I think what most of the diaspora experienced, which is also why the output from African Americans is the most impressive thing to me in the world. Like the creativity, the science, just the inventiveness, the resilience, the phoenix nature of these people, like, and how that is a model of innovation across the diaspora. To me, focus on what you have, which is so much wealth, instead of being falling into the anger and the desire to build factions amongst us because they can't have us align. Because imagine what would happen if you had the sturdiness of these Caribbean economies welcoming African American innovation. Do you think they want Black people to go to the DR and invest and build and have thriving lives? Do you think they want American education and Black ingenuity going to the Caribbean and disrupting their systems? Hell no, they don't. They want you to be afraid of us and think it'll be worse for you there to keep you here. Please wake the fuck up. Excuse my language, but can people wake up? They want to continue the isolation strategy of traumatizing Black Americans by having them feel there's nowhere in the world that will accept you. Your hell here is better than your hell over there. And that's actually not true. If you spend any time in the Dominican Republic, you'll find out quite quickly that that's not true. And they would rather have the algorithm feed triggering narratives of internal anti-blackness than inviting people to a bigger conversation. Maybe there are places where I can be me and it's a loved thing. Maybe that's possible. Maybe I could be in a society where, yeah, there's discrimination, but it's not hatred of my person. Is that different? That we don't have that in the DR. Nobody hates Black people for existing. They might be racist. They might think that they're Haitian. They might think that they're voodoo doctors. They might think other things. And the Haitian item has more to do with violence and the destabilization of the French than it does with the fact that they're Black. That's not even the issue. Of course, there's racism, but that is also more economically charged than we're allowing ourselves to talk about. And if we don't see how we're completely comfortable disrupting Europe and the Middle East for financial gain and factioning people over there, then Black Americans actually really do need to wake up and think about the context of history a bit more outside of the slave trade in the US, or you're going to miss how they're continuing to entrap you through isolation. That's the strategy that they're using. And this, I know Black Eyed Dominican, is to further isolate. And so I rebuke that personally. I know that I'm Black and I recognize my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, but it would be so disrespectful of me to pretend like I had to pass through the fire that they passed through, because I didn't. I did not. So I should not take that glory for their incredible resilience and their incredible creativity and their incredible innovation and their origination. That's not, I'm not a co-heir in that genius.
Mhm.
I'm a relative, but
Mhm.
that's their shit. And why can't we recognize that? That's all for me. Like, why can't we recognize the distinction as a good thing? Like, anyway, that's a hill I could die on too, because anyway, I
Yeah.
just commandeered that conversation, but that's
No, no.
I feel very strongly about this topic.
No, I think, and and the reason I bring it to you is because, again, as somebody who is building on the island and also grew up here in the States, like, you have spent a significant amount of time with both communities in different contexts. That's not just, oh yeah, I'm visiting my abuelita in DR and I'm in the campo hanging out. Like, you are having to dive into the business industry, which means you do have to intersect with the politics and all of these other areas that a Dominican American who is just engaging DR as tourism or as visiting family don't get to do. And so when we sometimes have the bigger platforms here in the States or have however many followers on social media and are making commentary on our one slice of life, we sometimes disrespect and ignore a larger conversation. I think everything you're saying about African American legacy and how we are relatives of it, but we are not the heirs of that legacy, right? As Dominican Americans, though, who are now living generationally deep in a way that, yeah, we are benefiting from Black American progress in really rich ways. What does it look like to just as a Dominican American say, I have ways to go to really understand your plight, your place in this country, the ways in which I was probably socialized to not put as much respect on what y'all have done and have attributed some of your power and glory to white people and white power here in this country and not Black power. I think we need to be able to humble ourselves to come to the table and have that conversation and not just say, oh, but I grew up in the hood with you. Oh, but I could say nigga too. And like,
No, you can.
so badly. Sometimes Dominican Americans want so badly to hold on to a piece of the American pie through the Black American pie in a way that is not ours. It's not ours. It's not ours. Is there a new age in which we can build and coexist with Black Americans and build something anew? Yes, but it is something that has to respect each other's backgrounds and history and be clear about the legacy it is trying to build in its coexistence moving forward. But we cannot act like, oh no, but we're all Black and it's all fine. Oh no, there's a lot of dismissiveness from Dominican Americans towards Black Americans when we're having these conversations. And I'm like, and then this is why we can't move the conversation forward because we're mad
Mm,
about 10 different things. But when we're talking about one thing where, yes, racism exists. So some people might be like, oh, but they are still racist. Yes. But if we cannot talk about the political science behind the racism itself, then we are also losing the opportunity to learn about other intersections that are not just race based, that have other solutions that we can actually tackle, like economy, because we're too busy trying to make sure that everybody believes somebody is racist when really that racism may just be a economic driver, which is fucked up. But then the question becomes, how do we change the economy versus, oh, how do we end racism? You
yeah, come
can't
on now.
end racism, but you can restructure systems and understand that through the histories of our people. And like you said before and said so beautifully, we all come to this fabric of the diaspora with our own peace, our own pride, our own backgrounds. Even as Caribbean people, what Jamaica has gone through is different than what DR has gone through, is different than fucking St. Kitts, St. Lucia. We have so many differences. And so the question becomes, how do we want to grow together if we can even get to a place where as a diaspora, we can agree that we are an economy in our own, and it can be a diverse economy. Just
Hmm. Just us. We need to know where we begin and where we end.
yes,
Boundaries is not a barrier, right? I just think this is such an important conversation because, and I just like to kind of bring an example more related to my business. I was born and raised in the States. I'm a New York Dominican, but I was born and raised in the States. And even like, I felt like I was a third culture kid no matter what, because Dominican New Yorkers, I was an outsider to them too, because I lived in a very well-to-do, primarily Jewish neighborhood in Queens. I grew up in Kew Gardens, not because we had a bunch of money, but because my mom stuffed us into the tiniest apartment she could afford so we could be zoned to a good school. So while I had a Dominican upbringing, my immediate context was not very Dominican. So I grew up in this weird, I know I'm Dominican, I hear of this place, but I'm not really around other Latinos that are like me. And I'm growing up kind of outside of the context of the projections of what does it mean to be an immigrant, right? I had a very different exposure from a very young age that allowed me to really understand that a lot of the limitations of what we think is real about what our racial experience is highly context based because I didn't grow up with some of the same limitations in terms of what was possible for me, simply because my educational environment didn't set those boundaries for the children in that school. Of course, there was like some nonsense, but like, people were talking about college in elementary school. People were talking about this kind of job, that kind of job. I made friends that had very different backgrounds. Like the possibility for me, the horizon was bigger just because of one specific choice. And that doesn't make me any less Dominican, but it does draw a distinction between maybe someone who grew up in the Bronx, who grew up where they could afford to live, who didn't understand the way that the system games things and the zoning and all of this other stuff. My experience contrasted to even this Dominican in New York is different, right? And there's pros and cons to that. So when I came back to the DR to start Inaru, with my sister, having never lived there, we didn't even go to the DR as kids. Like I went to the Dominican Republic as an adult. My mom wasn't in, the circumstance or the situation to be buying 5 tickets for her 5 kids every summer. So we didn't have that cultural exposure to the Dominican Republic until we were adults. This is post college. All I have is the stories of my parents of what they remember about a country 30 years ago. So we moved there at the peak of the pandemic, yo. I'm meeting a bunch of relatives I didn't even know existed. And I'm trying to like do a thing in an industry that is as old as time in the country. Who the hell are you? Is the first question that everybody in the DR is going to ask. Whose kid are you? What do you mean you want to do cocoa? Are you a gringa? Like, you look Dominican, you don't sound Dominican. But it wasn't mean spirited. It was just like people were trying to figure out, what is your identity? Do you think you're Dominican or do you think you're American? And they were going to be open to my answer. They were going to be open to treating me the way I saw myself. I was very clear. I'm Dominican, but I grew up in the States and I'm here because I want to do something good for the country. But I have a lot to learn, but I do know a lot in terms of business in an American context. And I want to use what I've learned to benefit the people here because I want to create an environment where someone like my mom doesn't have to leave her country because there's industry there. And everybody was able to get on board with that immediately. I didn't have to jump through the Dominican hoops. It was like, wow, that's brave. Good luck is ghetto over here sometimes, but let me see if I can help you. It was just like, okay, that's pretty idealistic. Let me see if I can help you out. Like, okay, welcome, cousin. Truly, the experience that I had building this company, it's not to say that there wasn't shady stuff that happened. That comes later. But the amount of positive momentum from people who look like everything, blonde people, the Minister of Trade, the Free Trade Zone, lawyers that did pro bono work while we were starting, who look like everybody because they understood that I identified as a Dominican. I was coming back to a place that I knew I belonged to, but didn't know. So they were very happy to show me what I didn't know. And I think if you fall into the American narrative or into the diaspora narrative, that these people are racist and this is what they think. Yes, they have filters and prejudices that allow them to thrive in their society because it was useful. But it's not from a place of hate. And that is a very important nuance.
Yeah.
We just need to think a little more critically as a people.
Thinking critically and also just, again, like I said, holding yourself accountable to the moment where sometimes the intention behind how we move, even though it doesn't have hate, it does have repercussion. And so if somebody speak to the repercussion of what your actions are, if your motive is a hate and holding on to a hateful narrative, then it should be easy enough for you to receive the feedback, if you will. You know what I mean?
True.
Of, hey, I know that you ain't mean it this way, but when you say this, you're excluding this, and maybe you didn't know that history, and maybe whatever. I don't have to fight you and put you in a box of, oh, you're, anti-black, blah, 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 because you did that. But can you meet me in the learning of how we learn how to show up in those spaces? And to me, to sort of like wrap us on this point is what's missing. Not everybody knows the full history. There is tons and tons of oral history that has been lost in all areas of the diaspora on any land. And there are people who have their lived experience where even if, their lived experience doesn't mirror the whole truth, we have to understand what systems have made it so that this is the reality in which this Black person in the diaspora has had to experience themselves and their siblings across the diaspora. What is the machine behind that? Because most often it is not just personal prejudice. It is survival. It is miseducation. It's a lot of other things that, again, we can do something about that. We can't change everyone's mind, but we can do something about the factories that output all of this behavior. And if we are wanting to unify in something, let's just unify in the basic respect of hearing each other out and understanding how we may or may not consciously or unconsciously be causing harm to each other.
Mhm.
Because it happens both ways, because we're, and we could go on and then talk about, there's Dominican Americans who are like, yeah, I came here early, or like I was born here, but I have my parents' accent and I was bullied because it was very clear that even though I look Black, I was an immigrant kid. And there are people who hold those feelings, and like those feelings are valid and we can
Yeah.
that. But that then still doesn't negate whatever's happening from the Dominican side on the. So this is what I'm saying. It's almost like a ping pong back and forth, but we either decide that we're going to play that game of back and forth for learning and understanding and progress forward, or we do it just to keep a good soundbite and keep this toxic narrative alive, and then start applying that to people who aren't even at the fucking ping pong table with us. They're on a whole different type of time.
100%. So actually, something that you said there, and recognizing that to wrap and transition elsewhere. I think the big issue with a lot of these complicated conversations is that people forget two things: there's perspective and there's awareness. Depending on the problem that you're trying to solve, you have to look at it from a different perspective. So the first thing is making visible, creating awareness on the impact without assuming that the thing or the person that is hurting you is aware. They don't assume that they are aware of your perspective, because 99% of the time they're not. They're just operating from their perspective, and it doesn't include yours because they can't see through your freaking eyeballs. So I think a lot of the times we run into these highly charged emotional conversations because people don't want to admit that your perspective is not universal and you cannot possibly understand what that other person's eyeballs are seeing. But the place to begin is to ask and then allow yourself to imagine that perspective. So then you can adjust your behavior. Then humans can understand, how do I accommodate your existence? Not because I'm tolerating you, but because I understand this missing perspective, even though I will never live it. But I can now understand the impact of my perspective on your life and adjust. If we want to be effective as a community of diaspora, we have to understand this. We have to understand that we actually have to humble ourselves and ask, show me things from your eyes, and I'm going to take what you see. But that doesn't mean that what you see is true for me. That doesn't cancel that is the impact. But we have to be willing to admit that the truth might not be one-sided. And if we are uncomfortable with that because it triggers our trauma, we're never going to get anywhere.
I think that in that willingness to learn and hold accountability against how you're showing up when it does cause harm is also, on the other side of that, you may be causing no harm, but what does it look like to be open to healing your triggers? Not because that means that suddenly now you have to accept anybody who is harmful and blah, blah. It's actually just about saying, I don't
Healing.
carry the anger and the charged energy at all times. I can exist with some level of peace and self-love. I don't think Dominicans need to feel like, oh man, I hate myself and the existence and everything that is Dominican because we don't think we're Black. Because to take on that narrative is, again, to ignore the fact that, one, that's not holistically true, and many Dominicans know know they're Black.
It's like, also, I feel like you coming for us, you can't say that to the person you're actually mad at. Please bring that energy to the where you're shucking and jiving, okay?
Right.
Because you're bringing a lot of heat over here. Please take that to your workplace.
Right.
Where they're actually paying you less on the dollar.
Yeah. Yeah. Let us focus on these things at all of their levels, because again, once we go around and around and around and point all our fingers with each other, we still come back to colonization. We still come back to harmful capitalism. We still come back to other things that doesn't, quote unquote, see color, as they say, because what they see is power and opportunity, and they will take advantage regardless. What I mean? Regardless of their own people, of people who don't look like them. And yes, racism is real and it is fucked up, and we have to reckon with that. But we cannot center a whole people and their identity and their contributions to the world on one sentence. I know Black, I'm Dominican. We are so much more than that. And it'll serve us to step into the power of what that means and find intersections for us to grow together.
Amen. Completely right.
With that, with that, I do want to move into our plate of the day because I want to learn more. I was like, we went in on this, but you know what? I think it's important. I think it was important for us to really go deep into that conversation. And I'm sure that there will be people who listen who are like, oh, but we're missing this context and that context. We're not considering this. And I want to say wholeheartedly, probably and 100%, it is hard to tackle this in one small amount of time. So engage the conversation, comment, like bring in the perspectives that me or Janet missed. Let's have this conversation. But we're going to move into our plate of the day because talking about the American dream and how a lot of people come to the States and romanticize America to be the space where they can thrive does come from a lot of ways in which America has gone into these countries, including Dominican Republic, and have helped the destruction of local economy and have put the political system in a place where the fact that you can say we're the only factory or we're the only this, when once upon a time that wasn't true. We lost so much along the way. And when we think about Dominican Americans and Dominican excellence, a lot of people do think about what is excellence if I make it in America and if I do everything in America. But what does it look like to go back home and to choose to take the longer and harder route? And I say that just as, Dominican time is real different than American time.
Ooh,
The
tell
speed
me
of
about it.
things, the way people move, they move at the speed of their nervous system and not always at the speed of an economy. And yes, sometimes people are like, oh, but if it was an American white person, they would move a certain way. That might be true too. But I encourage us to really take the slow ride and understand the systems in our country and how we can still build. It might be a slower road. It might look a lot different. It might not be the instant fast food that American capitalism and entrepreneurship sells you, because it's what they sell you, because we know that here building our businesses, especially Black, brown, Latino, whatever, we don't get as many chances to fail as white
Nope.
led businesses. So there's a lot of things I can go on and on that are stacked up against us, where go with your people. And some of those intersections are not at the top of your list of what is oppressing you and what you're doing. It might just be a slower supply chain. You know what I mean? So talk to me about your journey, because I think not many people have the insight of what it's like to build in DR. They have insight on being Dominican and like using highlights of our culture to build your American brand, but
Yep.
you are building on the island. And I want to hear about how you got started, how it's been going, and any guidance that you have for people who would want to build something in DR.
Definitely. So, like as I said, like definitely grew up as a New Yorker. My parents, come from agricultural communities. My dad had this cocoa farm that we had been hearing about since we were kids. This amazing magical farm. And really, this was like a pandemic pivot, to be very honest with you. We had always said that eventually we would do something in the DR, help him out with his farm. My parents always had all these amazing entrepreneurial ideas of what could be done on the island, because I do think something that is like across the diaspora is that we're an entrepreneurial people. We always have an idea. There's always a business that could be built. And, during the pandemic, I was working at a biopharma. My sister at the time was working in a VC, and I was not happy with my life, right? Like I was not enjoying my job. It was not fulfilling. I was getting paid very well, grateful to have a good job during the pandemic, but like I was not having a good time doing my work. And my former boss knows that. So if he hears this, what's up? But it is what it is. And, but started the businesses, my dad called me because his mother passed. My grandmother passed away. He was super upset. So I flew down at the end of February to go see him. And then my two younger sisters also came. We were with him, went to the funeral, met all of these people that I didn't know we were related to because we had never really spent a lot of time in the DR, and spent a lot of time on his farm while we were down there, like just going and eating the avocados and listening to stories from childhood, like just being in the country, because the pandemic was obviously a stressful time. And seeing what was going on in cocoa. And my younger sister Erica at the time was like, Jenna, I really feel like we could do something with the cacao. Like I feel like we're helping him get certified organic, but like we could probably do a business. Like my dad was like, yeah, if we combine cacao and coffee, and we could, you guys are smart, you guys, all of you could figure it out. And always like, yeah, let's do something. And while we were there, oh, and then the airport shut down in the DR. So we were only supposed to be there for 2 weeks, but then
Yeah.
we got locked in the country. So that was the best blessing, actually, because I was like, what? I was supposed to go back to New York, but apparently not. So we were just like trapped in the DR, but the worst places to be stuck during the panorama. And I start saying, okay, Dad, I need data. I want to go talk to the other farmer cooperatives. I was starting to look at the price of cacao. Like, well, hang on a second. If it's selling for 3,000 a ton, how much money are you making? And I just started following the numbers. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, how is it that the farmers are making this little money when I'm seeing what the price allegedly is? How come they're not getting it? Who's getting the money? The money somewhere. Someone's paying it. So we ended up, because we got stuck in the country, doing this very deep, analyst level study of the cocoa supply chain in the DR by following all of the intermediaries around and asking a bunch of questions like, who are you giving the cocoa to? Where are you getting the money? Where are they getting the money? Who's actually the buyer? And sticking together that there's 7 people in between the farmer and the exporter. And then the question for me was, why? There was this narrative that all of these intermediaries are just thieves and are just screwing over the farmer. I'm like, that can't be right. So ask the intermediary, well, where are you getting your cash? And, why are you taking this percentage? And the intermediary revealed, well, we don't get paid to do this. They just front us the money to buy the cocoa, but they don't pay us. And I have to pay for gas and I have children and I'm taking on a bunch of risks moving all of this cocoa. I don't get paid. I'm like, wait a minute. You don't get paid for logistics? You don't get paid to collect the cacao? And I was like, okay, maybe it's just in this community. No, the entire cocoa industry, basically all around the world, is still reliant on unpaid labor to aggregate all of the cacao, to ferment all of it, to dry it. And all of these people who work at the cooperatives, who do this work on behalf of the farmer, of course they are going to take a percentage of the money that they're being lent. They're being lent money to do free labor to buy a product. That's how food is sourced today. And for me, it was mind-boggling. I was like, this can't be real. People are talking about fair trade. People are talking about this. I'm actually seeing how these mechanisms play out at an international scale. I'm like, this is crazy. So you're telling me that the only legitimate transaction is between a broker or a trader and a formal exporter, and then that's it. Everything else is just kind of on favors and borrowed cash. I'm like, oh, this is insane. So then I ended up doing a very close study on the French wine industry. I'm like, well, hang on a second. There's other food industries that the farmer is not out here in debt for 15 years because the way commodities works is very advanced indentured servitude for generations because the farmer needs money outside of the harvest. So they're borrowing in advance from the exporter and then they sell their cocoa harvest in the future. So it was creating this completely crazy economic dynamic where your harvest was always pre-sold at the lowest price possible because of this collection process. And this is just how trade had been since Columbus. That's just how commodities trading has always been done. And it's never really changed. And what I noticed with this process was oh, this is a huge risk. The farmers are very old. Nobody's making enough money. Nobody wants to be a farmer. The demand for cocoa is increasing. Crops are decreasing. And the people who are far away buying these beans have no freaking clue because they're just, making money on paper without actually knowing, kind of knowing that cocoa is going away, but not feeling the impact of the inequality on the cash. So basically, our whole premise of the business after spending 5 months following farmers around and realizing that this is a bubble that's going to burst was saying, okay, this doesn't make sense. We're going to follow a model that makes sense and change it. We're going to connect the farmers. We're going to give the farmers contracts. We're going to hire these logistics people and pay them a salary to do logistics. So yes, my beans will be more expensive. And the only business that can support these costs is a chocolate factory and a chocolate company. And it doesn't make any damn sense to put all this cocoa on a boat to go process it in Germany where the labor cost is super high when I could process it in the Dominican Republic and then sell to the Germans the cocoa mass, the cocoa powder, the cocoa butter, and they can keep making their chocolates because they're incredible artisans. The Swiss are incredible chocolatiers. They have amazing brands. Amen. God bless. Nothing wrong with having excellence in brand building and excellence in culinary arts. Great. But it doesn't actually make supply chain sense to do the processing over there. There's so much risk that you're incurring. So our bet was, yeah, you're going to see a reshoring within the next 10 years of production. And I want to be first. I want to build a factory. And then that factory can profit share with our farmers. and bring them into the economic model of success, like vineyard owners, like olive oil farmers, like all of the agricultural producers in Europe, like dairy farmers in these countries. How come none of them are poor? They all have commercial contracts with the end product. It's not a it's there is a model of success in places where we value the farmer, and Dominicans needed to develop a sense of national pride to know that their farmers are also worthy. And that was really why I was so aggressive about building a brand. It's like, no, I'm not interested in just being a factory that sells and makes margin and it's an invisible situation, because we're losing value because we're not owning the terroir, the territory. This comes from the equator, so you can't get better than from the source is the premise of the business. And you're going to pay for that. You're going to pay for the traceability. You're going to pay for the cleanliness of the product. You're going to pay for the ethics, because if you don't pay, you're going to pay at one point or another. And right now they're paying because there's no cocoa. So that was us 5 years ago. But when I'm telling you that when we went around the DR telling people, we're going to build a factory and we're going to pay the farmer 2 times as much and we're going to be a brand, people looked at us like we had 5 heads. They're like, this is a really cute idea. I love what you guys want to do. I'm going to support you because this is so noble. I don't think it's going to work, but let me help you anyway. Because, like, you go, Glen Coco. That was basically the attitude. But people were very helpful. They were like, this is such a noble idea. I don't think it's possible, because if it was possible, someone would have done it. That was the perception, was like, you guys really think you figured something out that nobody else could figure out with way more money than you? Okay, good luck. But I do like your moxie. So let me connect you with this Coco guy. Like, I promise you, people would just listen to the pitch and be like, well, I know someone who works in the export, blah, blah, blah. Good luck with that. And they were very open with their connections. They're like, I don't think that if this happens, that'll be great. But, I don't know. So that's a very long Genesis story. Like, how did we get started? Why did we get started? It was really just like a discovery process and realizing, like, we don't bet on ourselves. Like, we can blame the global north. Yes, obviously, that's a part of it. But the bigger problem is that we believe the lie. So then we're enforcing the lie in the country by not choosing to say, okay, well, hang on a second, right? You got to be smart about it. I still sell chocolate to Europe because they have a wonderful chocolate economy, and that's great. I think they should be able to thrive. Buy the cocoa mass. Buying the beans is too risky for both of us, right? Better for you to buy the cocoa mass than to buy the beans. Better for us to sell the mass than the beans. You make a little less margin, but you have 50% more supply. Obviously, the math is going to math for you and for me. So, yeah, anyway, that's a very long rant to say it was really a discovery process, and then it became a very data-driven process of like, hang on, these numbers don't make any damn sense. and they got to make sense to make dollars, okay? So that's how we started.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that point of we don't bet on ourselves, so we don't even start, like we don't even try, is a big one, is a point well taken, because yeah, it does sound like if it's impossible, it's impossible. It does make you wonder, well, why aren't these other larger, chocolate companies doing it this way? But I think we often fail to recognize the power of people who are building with true integrity, right? And the idea that, like, sure, you had the farm in your family, you're thinking like, what can we do? What can we do? But it sounds like part of what ignited the system that you built around this idea was an injustice that you saw. It's an injustice that these people were not getting paid and that is a norm. And you said to yourself, rather than be like, damn, that's the norm, that's crazy. Well, I need these amount of orders and da 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 da. You know what I mean? Because you could have.
That's very true. That's very true. Would have been easier.
Yeah, nobody would have said, oh, you specifically are the problem and blah, 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 blah. They couldn't, because you didn't start that system. You were just integrating, because your larger umbrella idea of what do we do with this cacao farm and blah, blah, blah is just one of many. And so what you did was you decided to innovate on a particular intersection that is connected to a larger vision that you have. And sometimes that's all it takes to really revolutionize something. You guys haven't changed the entire industry yet, and that might not even be your goal or need or your ministry to have to do. But the fact that you built a model that in theory somebody else could replicate, right? Somebody else can go somewhere else, whether it's in DR or somewhere else where they're sourcing cacao,
Please do.
you know? Exactly. And then that was going to be my point. And it's not like you said, oh, and this is a patent. And by the way, nobody else can do this for their workers because this is our thing. This is a thing. You created a system. And a lot of times we get caught up, to your point, talking about what's wrong and what's wrong and what's wrong. And sometimes we just got to fix the little, leg of the table that's wobbly that we can fix at the table that we are at. Right. And what that
Mm-hmm.
does, to the point of the conversation we were having before, like, I'm sure there's a lot of Black people working there. Right. And so when we talk about, how do people help support each other beyond this, like, I'm going to hit you on the head and make sure that you recognize you're Black, but also I'm going to give you a more equitable work experience where it gives you, one, the dignity and integrity that you deserve in what you do, because transporting this cacao and doing that work is not easy. I mean, as a Dominican who did spend a lot of her life like visiting the island, one of the things that to this day I always just am in awe of is when you're driving behind the trucks that have like the big ass piles of, whether it's plátanos or whatever, like seeing these hardworking people, and this is their every day. This is their every single fucking day. So to say that you deserve to look at your work with pride and dignity and pay, and that you're paying people double, like that is no easy feat. And so I just want to like give you your flowers for that.
Oh,
And
thank you.
for
Appreciate that.
not just sort of dipping into the system and being like, well, this is how this works, so I'm going to fall in line. I do find, and this is a gripe that I have often with entrepreneurs in the States who are representing whatever, whether it's Black diaspora or whatever background, that we say, oh, what is it that the white man system says we got to do in order to get favor in VC? Okay, cool. Let me do that so I can get favor in VC.
Correct.
Because the idea is I need the money first in order to be able to do anything transformative. Where you said, obviously money is needed, like things are needed, but you're like, okay, but here's what I can control. And this is sort of a bottom line that is important to me. And
Mm-hmm.
here are the ways that I'm going to think about how the money can still come in, AKA still selling chocolate to Europe, right? Still selling it in different forms. Because the goal is not to say we're going to just keep the dollar only here and nobody else, because maybe that isn't beneficial. Maybe our local economy and our diasporic economy is not set up yet in a way where that is what you can just solely say. But we don't have to solely say it. If people are getting paid ethically all around, then sell the chocolate every motherfucking where, because it's still
Exactly.
to circulate the money in the places where we care about making that change. And so, yeah, that is truly incredible. And I'm curious, because like I said, the Dominican ways are so different. I wonder what it was like being in an environment that, I don't know if male dominant will be the word or what it is, but that some of these norms around business people, what a businessman is versus a businesswoman coming into that landscape. Was there anything around being women who are trailblazing in this economy that you faced? And what did you learn from that?
So I would say, well, I've been an entrepreneur. This is my third business.
Period.
Um, but I've been a Black woman the whole time. So the reason I bring this up, like, I had worked in a tech company. I was like the CEO of a tech company. I had started as an assistant. I'm a college dropout. Like, my background doesn't make any damn sense for what I'm currently doing. Why do I bring this up? I was a babysitter for a long time, and it was one of my favorite jobs. The reason I'm bringing this up, and I would say, like, if someone wants a superpower advantage in capital markets or fundraising or business, my advice would be, do not assume the identity of your wound. Whatever you think people think about you, do not make that your personality. Also, ideally heal that, because I truly, like, I did not have in my head that I was going to be treated differently in this meeting with the minister of this, the free zone of that. Like, I grew up with an entitlement of, I know that I'm right and I'm capable, so you will listen to me, and if you don't, you're an idiot. Like, so personally, maybe that's arrogant, maybe it sounds that way, but because of how I grew up with my parents, my family, we didn't grow up with low self-esteem in terms of our inherent value. Our parents raised us very clearly as, you are worthy even if people can't see. That's them being blind and dumb. You will find an environment that will know what they're looking at. So I had an advantage in that one, I grew up in New York, so you see all sorts of models of success. I went to LaGuardia, and LaGuardia gave me so much room to be a tyrant. I was like definitely the tyrant of the tech department. I was protesting for more structure in our work. Like, I
I
mean,
need that for when you guys went on. I didn't even realize you were one of the people who led that. But when you guys were like,
no, I was the organizer of the strike. I busted into the principal's office and said, "I'm striking. You guys aren't getting nothing."
let me
Okay.
tell you, there were drama majors that, just as a quick sidebar, were like, oh, in our shows, and we're so invested. And I was like, I kind of fuck with this. Yeah, because if they're not getting fairly treated, then fuck these shows. It's just a grade. I mean, it was a performance, but at the end of the day, I'm like, this is just a grade for us. It's not our job. So, like, if they need to go on strike, let them go on strike. So I didn't know that. Kudos to you.
I was out here. I was like, this is child labor. We will not be disrespected. And
Yes.
it was child labor, and we were being disrespected. And it was actually the disrespect that was the bigger problem. So I was like, you will understand the people that support you, or you ain't getting your show. So actually, the reason I bring this up, what was it like building in the Dominican Republic? Of course, I was able to lean on my parents from a certain extent in terms of cultural context and learning a bit, but the country had changed drastically since they came to the States before I was born. So I honestly like asked some of the folks that I knew in the States, like actually one of our lawyers in the US connected us to a law firm that was very trustworthy in the DR. We were able to rely on them for the things that we didn't know. And I just would like very confidently and boldly just feel like, hey, I would love to have a meeting with you. My sister and I are working on this business, would love your advice, would share with people what we were building. And I didn't walk in feeling like I couldn't talk to anyone. Like I just felt like either you're going to be supportive or you're not. And the faster I get to that answer, the better for me, because then it'll get me closer to who is or who isn't. So I don't really care if I'm rejected by anybody because it's faster for me to find who's going to accept. And I don't need to convince you. Either you get it or you don't, and it's binary. And if you don't get it, then I don't need to waste any time here. I need to go find who is going to get it. The more time I try to convince you that I'm worthy is actually degrading my value. So if there's something that someone could take away is do not try to negotiate your worth. You have already lost. The second you start doing that, you lost the conversation because it's not a negotiation. The price is the price, the value is the value. Either you get it or you don't. Not everybody can afford a Maserati. That doesn't mean it's not worth $300,000. You can buy a Toyota, and that is also a good car. I'm not going to argue with you, and there's pros and cons to both as to what you value, but don't compromise on your worth at any point, even if it takes longer to find the right buyer, even if it takes longer to find the right partner, because when they do come, the alignment is what's going to create speed in your business. So we spent a lot of the first year really presenting ourselves to a lot of people. Some people were rude and disrespectful, but I have so few memories of that because the second I caught that, I was like, I'm not going to waste time educating an idiot. Let me go find somebody who gets what I'm talking about. And what we mostly found was a lot of enthusiasm and respect and admiration of like leaving the comforts of the US and that we were so pro DR. People really admired the fact that we would leave where they were dreaming to go. And I was saying things like the DR is much richer than the US. There's no school shootings here. We have food everywhere. You have fresh water. We have everything. We have infrastructure. Like this, you have land that you own. Like this country is amazing. So I spent a lot of my time speaking power into the country in terms of how my American context viewed their riches. And it made people feel valued. Like, wow, you think I'm the shit? Well, then, okay, let me see how I can help you. Like, so I didn't actually have some horrible time navigating. The only thing was like Dominicans really do be taking their days off. I'll never forget like the month of January, basically nobody works. So I was sending emails to people and they're like, hi, it's Three Kings Day. And just so you know, since you're American, we don't fuck with none of this. Like it's the holidays. I'll talk to you when I'm back. And I'm not going to be back for at least a week. I was like, oh, damn. So I had to do some cultural adjusting, but it wasn't really anything that serious. Like actually the worst sabotage, manipulation, damage that we experienced in this process was always from Western individuals. It was always American investors or Western counterparties. It was actually not the racism or the sexism primarily in the US. Of course, there's some petty sabotage here and there, but nothing really, just people trying to defend their business interests through their own small mindedness. Nothing so grave. Like the worst challenges for us as a business were never internal. Like it was not that they were never internal. It was not national. It was certainly international that created more of an issue for us. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's important to highlight, that Western culture is what comes in with this, it's not human-centered. Like, I even think the correction of, like, "We on vacation, girl. Sorry. Like, we're not on your time." You know what I mean? It's not a disrespect to the business or what you're trying to do. It's just like "Oh, we have lives outside of this, and so do you. Enjoy the time off." You know what I mean? Like, teaching us also this, what I like to call the Caribbean time, like moving at a slower pace, but it's not a unproductive pace. It is just one that does prioritize certain things that in American culture we have not been able to do because everything is go, go, go. Please, the holiday season, that's one of the busiest seasons. That's when people need to be hustling, 10 times harder to get this campaign out and do this thing and this and that. And over there is kind of like, the season has arrived. They start to wind.
Yes, the season starts in September. It's
Yeah, literally.
crazy.
I was just in DR in October, and, October 1st, walk into my aunt's house, and the Christmas tree was up. The Christmas decorations were up, and she was like, "Yeah, because we're gonna enjoy all this effort I'm putting into these decorations, I'm gonna enjoy them all the way through January." And,
Mhm.
and it kind of brought joy to my heart, and I was like, "Yeah, this is the kind of, like, power we get to have in our own personal joy and preservation when we allow ourselves to move at the speed of our nervous system and not the speed of outputs and outcomes."
Capitalism. Yeah, and also the other thing too, you bring up a very good point, and like that humbling that I got from our legal team, I was like, wow, you're right. Dominicans on Friday are going to their campo. They're out of town on the weekends. Like they leave their computer at work. Like boundaries abound. I mean, there's foolishness as well, but the right to rest has not been stolen from the DR. Dominicans know that they have a right to rest. They know that they have a right to their weekend. They know they know certain things because we don't have the same extractive culture, particularly around Black people in the DR. Like everybody knows that don't interrupt me at lunch, right? Like I'm gonna eat my food without you up my case, and it's actually far more civilized in that sense. And what I learned in the process of building this business is like the barbaric level of productivity that has vestiges of slave culture that is the American capitalist system, right? Like, of course, it creates a lot of output, but it is very normal to work yourself to death in the US. That
Yes.
is not a thing in the DR. And it's the largest economy in the Caribbean and Central America. And it's not because people don't work. It can't be that. It can't be that. We can't have 80 free trade zones and be the largest exporter of medical devices because no one works. People work. They just know when to stop, and they're comfortable with things taking the time that it takes, and that actually does have to do with people are more connected to the land, so they know that things take time to grow. There isn't this disconnect from where things come from or how long it takes to make a thing. So being in the country, I think, actually kept us as a business very grounded to what was actually changing in the marketplace much faster than all of these so-called business people reading numbers but not living in the world. They were blindsided by all of the global changes. We saw this coming 6 years ago, not because we're geniuses, but yes, also that, but because we were living in the countries that were making the world move. So we were seeing the shifts, we were seeing the impact. We weren't living in this ivory tower bubble of convenience. We could see what was changing, and I think that if I can encourage anybody who's listening, like if you've got the dream of opening a coffee shop or you want to do this type of business or whatever, there is a world to be made outside of the US. And all of your education and knowledge and ability can thrive and be a massive value add and an asset in these countries that are looking for that type of vision. And there's a community of young people that are looking for places to create. Like
Yes.
the US is a very saturated market. And of course, there's opportunities here too, but if you have a call to do something, you might do it much faster outside of here, because I promise you there's no way I could have built this factory or this business in the US in the time that I did. I
The
couldn't have.
factory in the US? Girl, I can tell
No.
you firsthand, because I also have a background in tech and worked for many, many years at WeWork with the co-founder, Miguel McKelvey, and yeah, oh yeah, I was on the co-founders team, at WeWork, and so
You
I,
already know.
Yeah. So, but what we had like post WeWork, I continued working with Miguel on a couple of other projects. And for one of our clients, because we were investing in smaller companies, so on and so forth, they had a factory in North Carolina that they were contracting. And I got to do some like deep study there. And just from everything I learned, like even the idea of you saying opening a factory in the US, like I want to laugh, not to demean the dream, but to be like, oh, here? You want to talk about red tape that we think you would experience in DR here? Please,
Girl.
like, please. There's so many factories that have shut down and so many people, including white people, to just again to reemphasize that when it comes to economies, it don't always be the conversation about oh who's race and whatever. It just be about where the money moves. And so many factories that have shut down here for overseas, just the complications of all of that, they would have made it damn near impossible for you to
Mhm.
here. And so you're absolutely right. There are moments where we do need to take our dreams overseas. And some people might say, oh, well, that's American privilege to be able to say that you could even do that. Yes. And if, as you have so beautifully modeled for us, if you come with integrity and an intention and understanding how your privilege can actually uplift other people to say, I am privileged enough to pay my people 2 times as much. That's part of it. So it's my privilege. And now it is becoming their privilege as somebody who is working with me. If you're like, oh, yeah, but if I'm coming to a new country and how can I be the face of a company? Find a partner, a business partner. There are plenty of people who probably share your vision and probably have more connections on that soil who can work with you. And then together you can build something. So this resistance to innovation tied to nationalism and thinking about it as a framework to not emphasize colonialism or capitalism, like you have to bring the integrity, you have to model the practice. But if you're being called to do it on a different soil, go do it, but make sure that you are bringing that innovation and excitement through and not just settling for however other industries and other more colonizing forces are doing that kind of work on that foreign soil.
100%, because those industries will 100% pay you to do the dirty work. Like, because one of the things that I will say, like, I'm making it sound like it was a cakewalk. Every day of my life building this business, I look in the mirror and I ask myself, what the hell am I doing? Because it's not easy. It's very stressful. It's very fulfilling work, but it's extremely difficult. While there's a lot of support and alignment and people who want to see us succeed, there's a lot of people who simply cannot accommodate the reality of this business as something that can succeed and not be a threat to them. That does exist. Like, changing things is not you have to have the strength for the size of your dream, is what I would say. Like, we can say we want to change the world and make a more equitable way of doing business. There are plenty of people right now making money off of inequality. So when you say you want to do something more equitable, that means you need to be prepared to defend it. That is, you have to ensure that if you want to endeavor to do something, you understand the sacrifices that are going to be required to do it, right? So for us, rolling up in the DR, wanting to do something good in Cacao, I knew what the situation was. I introduced myself to all of the big players, and I gave all of our competitors in the country our business plan. Hi, here's what I want to do over the next decade in this country. I'd love to partner with you with my no money. I'm telling these giants, hi, I would love to partner with you because this is how I think the supply chain should work. And they're like, hi, you're crazy, but you're really cute. And if we can help you in the future and you have money to buy beans, sure, we'll sell you beans. And I'll tell you, Julissa, they do sell me product nowadays. They
Period.
do.
Period.
But I invited them to the vision. I was honest the whole way through. I kept everybody up to date with what we were building. And frankly, we're not competing at a scale that's a risk to them. And if anything, we help them sell through their products. I always had a mentality around collaboration wherever possible. Some people will refuse to collaborate with you because of pride, and that's fine. But over time, having a collaborative business approach will make you a more formidable competitor because you have a lot of friends. So I've always taken the friend versus foe approach in business because look, if that means I make a little less money and you make some money, but it's still within the ethics, amen. The thing I'm not going to compromise on is paying the people what they got to get paid, the cleanliness, the health of her product. And I'll tell you, I had many people approach us super excited about the business because what they understood was I'm going to get the cost discount of processing in the DR, but I'm not going to change the mechanism. Like, I'm going to get the cost discount and I'm also going to still keep paying these people less. So I'm just going to make even more than the more that I'm making. That a lot of people wanted Inaru to be the brand to keep the prices down and saw us as a remote controller for controlling the prices. That for many people, this is the perfect monopoly model. But I was very aggressive about, no, I will not be that lever, right? That's not the lever I will be. So if that means you're going to not give me money, then I guess I'm going to just struggle bust it out for the next 3 years. But I'm not going to compromise on you wanting to use me to entrap my people in a different way because you're going to give me some extra gold. Plenty of people in the country do that, and they get to sleep with themselves at night. I get to sleep with me, and I'm comfortable with my choices, even if it's made my life a lot more difficult to grow as rapidly as some of these companies that are giving $200 million out the gate. Because I certainly had a business plan that would demand that type of money, but I made do with the 10K, the 50K, the 5K, the 2K, the eventual millions that came in over a 6-year period, robbing Peter to pay Paul. But I wasn't willing to sell out on that. And to your point, that integrity is actually what's protected us from being consumed, because there's a strong coalition of trust around the business that you have to tread carefully, because we have a good reputation, because we've operated justly, and people want to do business with good people, but you have to be willing to defend your integrity. And I think a lot of people, when they're put up in that moment where they're being given an offer of like, hey, you could take the easy route, I'm going to give you a lot of money, you'll still have your dream, just compromise here, they take the early compromise and then you end up losing everything in the end. So what I would encourage people when they see things like Inaru or businesses that are similar, like, it is a fight every day to continue to operate in that integrity, because there are many temptations to not, because it's hard. But my purpose with the business is to prove it can be done, because if you have just one example, that will set off a lot of others, where someone else will look at Inaru and say, maybe I could do a banana chip company, or maybe I could make my own coffee brand, or maybe I could go to Jamaica, or maybe I could, like, if Inaru could succeed in being a proof point for maybe I could, then I have done my job. Like, I'm good, right? Like, I don't care what happens really after that, because that was the point. The point is to dismantle the story that there's only one place that you can realize your dream, and that it's only this land, or that it's only these people, because I don't look at it like anything that should be succeeding. I mean, I'm cute,
Period.
but and that helps. Pretty privilege is a thing, okay? Surprising people for being a cutie pie definitely helps. People definitely want to help a nice lady. You got to use your privileges. I don't got a lot as a double, triple minority, but I'm gonna be cute at these meetings, okay? And I'm gonna bring you chocolate. It is what it is. So that's kind of my soapbox for the day. Like, this has been crazy. All right, every day is a gut punch operating this company, but it exists, and we employ 40 people, and the chocolate is being sold in Korea, in Qatar, in Europe, in the US. We sold so much of our factory capacity next year. Like, it's a testament that it can be done. And that's the story that, when you invited me onto this, I was so excited to be able to share. Like, we've gotten this far, and it's been a very long and hard journey to get here. And there's just so much that I could talk about in terms of that process. But what I want to encourage people is, your little idea in your head is not a little idea. It is very possible, but you have to be very committed. You have to be willing to adjust to a certain extent, but like, your commitment is what can't waver. The world is going to waver, but you need to really stick to it.
Yes.
And eventually it will come to pass. Like,
Yes.
who knows what the timing is, but eventually it'll come to pass. That I know. So I speak that over all of you guys. Whatever seed you want to plant, it will grow, but you can't keep digging up the soil to see if it's growing. You got to leave it there and tend to it daily.
Yes.
And it will bear fruit one day. So.
Ugh, amen. This has been such a rich conversation. I'm just so grateful that the proof is in the pudding. You know what I mean? You have really dedicated, you and your sister. I know this is a team effort, like, you all have done such incredible modeling in this company. And again, I'm not surprised, because even from the basement days, you've been putting people in line and getting shit in order. And sometimes all it takes is allowing your dream to live beyond this American fabric in order to bring it to life. Because I bet you're not over there crying about Trump tariffs as much as everybody else is in this economy, or things like that. You're coming from out of DR, you're exporting out of. So even something like that, where somebody might be like, exporting out of DR, please, America. Fast forward to now, somebody's like, that's looking pretty good right now, you know?
Actually, American businesses are all trying to come and work in our free zones now. It's quite interesting. I'm like, you see, I told you guys 6 years ago. But anyway, I'm fine, right? We have food. Nobody's tariffing us. Like, we're good. Like, we're chilling. Like,
So perspective is everything. Janett, thank you so much for your time today, for this
of course.
rich conversation. Tell us, where can we continue to follow you, support you, anything upcoming that we should know about?
So we have a website, www.inaru.com. Right now, all of our products are on pre-order because we sold out in the US and we're shipping a new container. So by the holidays, you should be able to buy us, but sign up for our newsletter because we'll send a blast when all of our stuff is restocked. On Instagram, we're pretty active on Instagram. That's Instagram/INARUCACAO. So you can follow us there. I'm very active on our Instagram, and I'm Janett Liriano, like my name. So Janett, Janett Liriano, and that's my Instagram. I have a public page. So if you want to like catch my random monologues for the day or what I'm doing in Singapore or whatever, you can follow me there. And my LinkedIn DMs are always open. So if you've got a business that you want to start or have questions of like fundraising or migrating to another place and what was that like I really am quite responsive. So you can just tag me, and I always try to share whatever information I've acquired along the way if I can help you go do something awesome. So reach out. I'm always happy to say hi.
We need to be sharing these models and information with each other. So thank you all so much for tuning in today. You can find us at Ladies Who Brunch across all streaming platforms. And until next time, brunch.